Hello viewers, welcome back to another episode of Dex's Tech Lab. This is going to be a follow-on video from the one that I made a few days ago about getting the Quantel HAL and the Quantel DL fully working. Because that has now happened, it means that we can now go off and explore a few things that I've actually been wanting to explore for quite a while. So there's probably going to be a few videos come along in fairly short order. This is the first one. There'll be another one about the 5D masher, if you remember that one from last year. That is going to have a follow-up video as well because some interesting things happened with that. So if you haven't seen the video about getting the HAL and the DL working, I would recommend watching those first. But before we get started, I want to thank PCBWay for sponsoring this episode. This episode of Dex's Tech Lab is sponsored by PCBWay. PCBWay is your go-to resource to turn your electronics projects into reality. From PCB manufacturing with all the options you could possibly need. CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, you will not be short of options. I've used PCBWay myself and can personally attest to their service and quality. Go check out PCBWay.com, and I want to thank them for their support. So in that previous episode you saw me replacing the 20 spinning discs in the DL for Zulu SCSI cards. Each of those used a 16GB SD card, and on that card was a 1GB image which was an exact copy of the 1GB Fujitsu drives which were originally in the DL. That was done as a simple way to get it up and running. So I wanted to make all the discs like for the original SCSI discs. Obviously that got it running and everything seemed to be working fine. We're now using Zulu SCSI with SD cards, and this now has the meaning that we can arbitrarily change the size of the drives which are in the DL. Now, I'm sure some of you have already wondered, well, if you can make the drives any size you'd like, what can you increase the capacity of the DL and the capacity of the HAL? And generally, yes, this is true, but there are some quirks to it. So that's what I'm going to cover in this video. So the Quantel DL was sold by Quantel in various forms. It started life with, I believe, 512 megabyte discs in it, and over the years it just generally increased. You know how these things go, drives just get bigger. And what ended up happening was, by the mid-90s, it was pretty much standardized, as in there was two types of DL. There was the DL that was used for the Quantel HAL, and that used 21GB discs to give you 20GB for the whole storage, and that was just enough to get you your 15 minutes of video on the Quantel HAL. Now, the DL wasn't only used for the HAL, it was also used on a number of other machines. That were the Quantel Henry, the Quantel Edit Box, and the Domino, and a few other machines as well, like Clipbox. So the DL was not just tied to HAL, it was a general purpose video storage and streaming device that was used on various Quantel products. Now, on the products like Henry and Edit Box, those machines had extra features. They were higher grade products than the HAL, and that meant that they had bigger storage capacity. I think generally the Edit Box and the Henry would come with 2 hours of video, well, either 1 or 2 hours of video, and that was achieved by, you'd have your Quantel Henry and then you would have one DL plugged into it, and that would get you 1 hour of video. Then if you wanted 2 hours of video, you'd had a second DL that would parallel through and give you a total of 2 hours of video. So that means that the Dylans that we used for those machines had bigger discs in. And the discs that they used in for those options were the Fujitsu 4GB discs. And that gets you 1 hour of video on this version of the Dylan. Now, they never actually increased the size of the discs beyond that. They only ever stuck with 4GB maximum in this particular Dylan. The later revisions of the Dylan, which came sort of towards the end of the 90s into the noughties, those ones changed quite a bit. They went from using the big parallel cable to using fibre optic, and then they started jumping up in size of discs and the storage went up and everything became a bit more modern. But for this era of machines, this is the Dylan that was used with 1GB or 4GB discs in. So that means I can at least replace the discs that I made for this on the Zulu SCSI from 1GB to 4GB. And the Dylan will recognise those. The Dylan, what can it cope with and what can't it cope with? Well, the Dylan software, we know it fairly well because, as I mentioned in my previous video, we have two people who are responsible for some of the software that was written for this, which actually runs on the CPU in this machine. So we actually have some really great knowledge about how that software works. And what it does is when it starts up, it queries all of the disks to find out what their capacity is. And the smallest disk in the array becomes the maximum capacity of the Dylan. It's fairly logical. Now, the capacity is a command that comes from the SCSI interface. You query the drive and it replies with a number of blocks which are available on the actual disk. Now, this is actually a 32-bit number, and from what we can tell, the Dylan can use that maximum capacity of the SCSI interface from this era. Now, so that is a 32-bit number of the number of blocks on the disk. Now, I'm going to have to refer to my notes here. So that is about 4 billion blocks of 512 bytes, which works out that this can actually accept 2.2 terabyte disks, which is quite a lot, considering this is the mid-90s. Obviously, I don't think there was any disks available back then that were at that capacity, but it looks like they prepared the software for it. So it means that if we wanted to, we could put 20 2.2 terabyte disks in this, which would get us what about 44 terabytes. Now, I can't put 44 terabytes in this and expect it to work. That's not going to happen. I'm just explaining that the ecosystem that Dylan has is sort of its own little thing, and it's able to cope with it. What the HAL and other machines do with that is up for debate. I think it's remarkable that back in 1995-ish, you could have done this if you wanted to, made it 44 terabytes. Insane. We can upgrade the disks in this to pretty much whatever we like. Now, HAL is a very, very different thing. The way these two devices talk and work together is power on. This has nothing in it, has no software, nothing, and this will start booting its software. It'll get part way through, it'll upload the software into the Dylan will start and do all its thing, and then once the Dylan is running, it will report back to HAL to say how many thunks of video I have total capacity on the Dylan. Now, a thunk of video is one video field. So if HAL is defined for 625 line video, the thunk of video will be slightly different to what it would be if it was 525 lines. So HAL tells the Dylan thunks are this size, and Dylan will work out the number of thunks available on the whole device and report that back to HAL to say, I've got 43,921 thunks available on the disk. Now HAL will take that number and that will become the capacity of the Dylan. But it's not quite that simple. So Quantel licensed a lot of stuff when it comes to the Paintbox and HAL and Henry and everything. So everything tended to have option numbers. And that was also true of the Dylan capacity. So on the HAL, there's various options here on this machine that you could have selected or purchased from Quantel to give you storage on the Dylan. From the mid-90s, if you bought a Quantel HAL, it would have come with its Dylan and it would have had 21 gigabyte discs in to give it its full 15 minutes of capacity. But the options on HAL might have limited that. So it would have been a cheaper option to buy a 7.5 minute HAL. You still would have got the big disk array, but you just couldn't use all of it because you had to have the password to enable it. So that meant that there was a number of fixed options available. When you bought your HAL, you could have 30 seconds, you could have 60 seconds, you could have 2 minutes, 4 minutes, etc, etc. There was various fixed options. And that was true up until I think about the mid-90s. All the storage options were fixed. So you had a particular option, and if it was on your machine, it gave you 7.5 minutes, and that was it. It was fixed. Now, if that had stayed the same, there would have been no point in increasing the capacity of the Dylan to anything more than those 21 gigabyte discs, because the HAL software would have just said, well, I'm limited to X number. And the maximum of that number was 15 minutes. So using those fixed options meant that there was no option to use any more storage on the Dylan, so I couldn't get anything more than 15 minutes, which would have been a problem. However, Quantel decided to change the way that the Dylan capacity was licensed. I think probably because having those fixed options was a bit limited, and maybe a customer came along and say, could you do a deal for us for 10 minutes of video? And they would have to create a new option for that customer and compile it into the software and all that sort of stuff. So it was obviously not as a scalable way of doing the Dylan capacity. So what they did was they created a new option called option 15,000. Option 15,000 is quite a unique option when it comes to the software passwords on the V-series machines, because the option number itself defines some of its parameters, which means it's just about the perfect thing for us to have here. So the way it worked, option 15,000 defined the Dylan capacity. The number 15 was the actual option, and then the next 3 digits is the number of multiples of 30 seconds of Dylan storage. So if the option was 15,001, you'd have 30 seconds. If it was 15,002, you would have 60 seconds, etc, etc. So on the later machines, you tend to find that they have the option 15,000, and normally you see these machines, they have the full capacity of video, 15 minutes, which is option 15,030. You tend to find that on most of these later machines, which says I've got 15 minutes of video. Now, As you're probably aware, I'm able to make my own passwords, and that means that if I want option 15,031, I can do. So that's what I did. So I basically asked HAL to say, can you have 15 minutes and 30 seconds? Because I do know that there's always slack space on the Dylan that just doesn't really get used. So I was pretty certain that I'd be able to increase it by 30 seconds and without changing any of the disk sizes, and just see what happens. So I created option 15,031 and rebooted after installing it, and lo and behold, I got an extra 30 seconds of video, which was a really good sign, because it meant that the software does have the capacity of having video storage longer than 15 minutes. So with that in mind, I'm going to shoot for the big target here, and I removed all of the Zulu SCSI drives out, updated the disk image on there to a 4 GB image, went off and generated myself a password 15,120, which is, if you work it out, that gives HAL and Dylan 1 hour of storage. So I installed it, rebooted, and it worked. It actually worked. So this is absolutely remarkable that this is the first time probably in the world ever there is now a 1 hour HAL, which literally never existed. I'm sure there was some engineer at Quantel tried it, but they never sold it. They never sold a HAL longer than 15 minutes. So this is absolutely unique, and it's it's a massive game changer, because having 1 hour of storage means you can actually work on multiple projects at a time. You'd be surprised how quickly you use up those 15 minutes when you're creating lots of different elements for special effects and animations and things like that. It disappears very quickly. So being able to have an hour of storage means you can archive stuff off and just leave it there, because you know you've got so much more storage. So it's absolutely amazing that, yeah, I've got a 1 hour HAL. So I did a fair bit of testing. I had my camera plugged in and I just left it recording, and it all seemed to be fine. There was a few little quirks that I've seen. Some of those quirks would have actually been a problem when it had 15 minutes of video, to be honest. But aside from that, it works really well. I'm very happy. And of course, it also means that people like my friend Matthias in Cologne, who has 2 HALs and 2 Dylans, it now means that if he switches to either Zulu SCSI or Blue SCSI, he can increase the capacity of those machines to 1 hour each. That is a massive game changer. I guess you're probably also saying, well, can you go more than 1 hour? And the answer is probably yes. I will have to try it at some point, but for the time being, I'm sticking with the 1 hour because everything's working. I think as time goes on, when I get a little bit of free extra time and I can just play around with this kind of stuff, I can increase the, I might try doubling it again. I might try going to 8 GB images and go for 2 hour, 2 hour HAL, which would be amazing if it worked. But we'll see, we'll see. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to power the machine up. You can see it running, and I can show you the huge capacity I now have. Okay, what we're going to do first is I'm going to power the machine on. I'll show you the boot, and I'll show you the things that have changed in the boot, and I can also show you where these interactions between HAL and Dylan happen and where they're actually reported in the boot logs. I thought that might be interesting for some people to see. Right, so that's the machine turned on, and we just need to wait now for the CPU card to load in the boot file. So at this point here, this bit here is where the HAL software initialized the Dylan, and then that's when the Dylan starts to boot up. Dylan monitor running. That's Dylan saying this, I've booted up and I'm starting to boot up. We can see HAL telling the Dylan about the thunk size. So here we can see the Dylan telling the host, which is HAL, that it has 198,324 disk slots. It's using the term disk slots, but they're thunks, so that's fields of video available. The HAL says Dylan is okay, and it has 99,162 total frames of video, which totals 1 hour, 6 minutes, 6 seconds and 12 frames. On the actual Dylan, and you can see here configured for 3600 seconds or 60 minutes. So that's where HAL is reading the security password, enabling 60 minutes. So if I scroll down a little bit further, the machine is booted up long ago by now. We'll see in here, there'll be a point where we'll see Dylan ready. Somewhere. There we go. So that's the point where Dylan is fully booted up, and it's now reported to HAL that the Dylan is entirely ready. So it will continue to boot. Little nod to a future video here. I've got loads of Java applets. You'll see these in a future video. So that is all booted up, and we have our 60 minutes. So if I switch over to the actual HAL itself, we can see that there's nothing's changed as you'd expect. In clips, we've got no clips on the desktop, and it says there are 90,000 frames unused, which is exactly 1 hour. In terms of the little quirks that I've noticed, enabling 1 hour, this 1 hour HAL, this is one of them. So normally when you press this box, it tells you the number of minutes, seconds and frames which are still available on the Dylan. Now if I click it here, you can see that it's gone to 0000, and that is because this box was obviously never designed to have 1 hour in it. So there should be another set of digits here, and that's why it can't show the 1000000. So that is a little quirk. You can actually mitigate that by just permanently recording one frame of video onto the Dylan, and then it would always be 59 minutes unused, etc. So I can actually show you that. So if I go to my library, not my library, preferences, just stick color bars on, into clips and cell. You see now I'm 59 minutes, 59 seconds and 24 frames unused. So what I could do now is one frame save, and then just save that onto my system disk, and I can actually throw that away now because it's actually permanently saved on the machine, and I can carry on working, and I have 89,999. So that's a good way to fix that little issue, although it's not really that much of a problem. So other things that I've noticed which are an issue, if I sell those color bars again and make this, let's say I wanted it to be 2,000 frames long. You see, that box is limited to 1000 frames. I can't make it any longer than that because that box just doesn't let me do it. Now this would have been a problem on the original HAL with 15 minutes, so it's probably not really that much of an issue. So other little quirks, so if I, because I'm limited to 1000, so if I keep doing that, so that has 10,990 frames of that clip. So other things that I've noticed are in the effects menu. The timeline for setting keyframes is limited to 9,999, and that can't be increased. So that's another box which is limited. I'm not sure whether you'd want to actually really be doing keyframe things like this on clips that long, because HAL isn't that fast actually. So it would take a very long time to render all that anyway. But yeah, that's another little quirk. But again, that quirk was there with the original HAL. So that would have been a problem originally. That's not new because I've got 60 minutes of video. But that is another limitation. Now, as far as I can tell, these two places are the only quirks that I've seen about the length of clips that I've seen. We also have it in curves. You see that it's limited to 9,999. I've not noticed anything in paste up, but again, no, I didn't need to do that. Delete. Again, keyframes are limited to, I think, yeah, about 10. No. So the keyframes, it seems to be throughout the entire system, is limited to effectively 10,000 frames of animation. But as I said, that's exactly the same limitation that you would have had on HAL with 15 minutes anyway. Other things that are probably worth thinking about is the way that HAL records where these frames of video are actually stored on the DL. There is an internal database file on the system disk, and it keeps a record of which clips are using which frames of video. So because the DL can be heavily fragmented if it ends up getting that way, it's basically a database of all the fields of video and where they are on the disk and which clips are using them. The original HAL would have only had 15 minutes, so that database file would have only been of a particular size. It wouldn't have got any bigger because it never had anything more than 15 minutes. But we've now made that 4 times as big. So it'd be interesting to see when the DL gets full and possibly more and more fragmented, whether that database file, because it's grown in size, it might generate some issues with delays. Maybe the CPU card might take a little bit longer to process that little database, and there might be some delays somewhere. I don't know. I've not seen anything. I'm just speculating. But fingers crossed, it won't be an issue anyway. Now, obviously, I have tried recording. I've got a camera up here, and I've literally stuck it out the window, just filming the trees swaying in the breeze, and I've left it recording for well over half an hour, and it just works. So I'm pretty confident everything's going to be fine. There is also a possibility of going more than 1 hour, but this box here is going to get more and more confused if I have over an hour of unused. Plus, can this box go to 6 digits? Because if I go to, like I say, a 2-hour machine, that's going to have 6 digits in it, and will that work? Who knows? I will find out at a future point when I get around to actually giving that a test. But for the moment, I've got 4 times the storage of any HAL has ever had in the world. So that's kind of on the back burner for testing the 2-hour thing out. So this has all been excellent, great news for myself and Matthias and a few other people as well, because this fix, or this hack, should also work for things like the Paintbox FX as well, which is a more modern version of the HAL. It's exactly the same, but instead of having this huge great big box with 20 spinning discs in it, the DL has been compacted down onto 3 discs which live in the bottom of the HAL crate. It's called a buddy, and it means that they could also be potentially upgraded, but we'll have to look at that in the future. So all in all, this is absolutely marvellous news. I'm very happy and pleased. Okay, thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.